Hello Earthlings and Aliens, it's me, Arteza, your art buddy, and today I'm going to review 4 different brands of markers: the ZIG Clean Color Real Brush Pen, the Copic Sketch Marker, the Tombow Brush Pens, and Arteza Everblend markers. For this video, I drew one image and then traced it using my lightbox. The idea was to make 4 identical images to color, but it kind of turned out like a game of telephone. This should still prove my point, so whatever. I'll be grading these on a rubric of 1. Feel. What's the general quality? How does it feel like to draw with it? Number 2. Cost. For this, I'm focusing more on long-term cost rather than upfront cost. So I'm considering both the upfront price and the durability of the markers. Number 3. Color selection and consistency. For this, I'm considering how many colors are available to you when you buy these markers, and one of my biggest pet peeves, does the color of the marker match what's on the cap or the box? Number 4, coverage. Can it cover a wide area cleanly without streaks or variation in the color? And 5, blendiness. Will it blend? I'll also be sharing some tips and tricks on how best to use each kind. Let's get started. The first markers I'm going to look at are the ZIG Clean Color Real Brush markers. These, true to their name, only have one tip, which is a synthetic brush with individual fibers. The feel of these, I'd give a 3 out of 5. The brush pen is really easy to use and can handle thick and thin lines as well. The markers themselves are compact, about the size of an average pen. But I found that the lids aren't very secure, so I wouldn't put these in a pencil pouch or bring them around with me or anything. For cost, I give them a 2 out of 5. They'll run you about $3 to $4 US each, and a pack of 12 will cost you about $40. They're a middle of the line priced marker, but when you consider how long they last, which is not very long, it adds up pretty quick. I've had these for a while and tend not to use them, but they still dry up pretty fast. They're also not refillable, which is bad news for cost and plastic waste. For colors, I give them a 3 out of 5. There's about 90 colors and they are true to the box. The sets seem to be boxed based on similar family, like pastels, dark colors, and jewel tones. And there's a fine enough selection of skin tones, but for some reason there's no skin tone set. I've also found them to be lacking. Coverage, 1 out of 5. They're pretty horrible at filling a big space. Since there's only the brush tip, you have to go over it in multiple layers and it comes out pretty splotchy. It'll work for small areas and look really nice, but it's not exactly going to be useful in filling in a background with a wash or anything. For blendiness though, I give them a 5 out of 5. The best part about these markers is how beautifully they blend. What they lack in variety, they easily make up in how the colors blend together without getting muddy. They blend easily without the need for a colorless blender. Overall, I like these markers for smaller drawings. Because of their tendency to dry up and their abysmal performance covering a large area, I tend to mostly use them in my sketchbook to fill in a small space or to color in a fairly small drawing. They're beautiful, and at the end, the art that you can make with them looks closer to a watercolor drawing than a marker drawing. Their overall rating is a 3 out of 5. They're pretty good, but they're not particularly versatile. Ah yes, the classic Copic marker. These are interesting in that they come in 3 different varieties. The Copic Sketch, which has a brush pen and a chisel tip, the Copic Classic, which has a fine tip and a chisel tip, and the Copic Chow, which also has a chisel tip and a brush tip, and are less expensive but come in fewer colors. I'll be focusing mainly on the Copic Sketch markers, but these ratings apply for the most part to all of them. For a feel, I give them a 4 out of 5. These markers are pretty substantial, with an oval shape to prevent them from rolling. They feel expensive. The brush tip is a felt tip, not individual fibers, and it can wear down over time, and the chisel is big enough to cover a wide area, but still can be used for a finer line. The colors come down saturated, and usually a lot darker than they look dry, so it's best to wait for the ink to dry before going in and blending more. I find the brush a bit big to handle thin lines, but that might just be a me problem. For cost, I give them a 2 out of 5. The biggest drawback of these markers, in my opinion, is cost. These will run you about $8 US each, or $45 US for a pack of 6. They're best to buy on sale. I usually buy them at Blick, where the rewards card can get them for you for around $5. These sets will often be excluded from coupons though, and I've amassed this collection over a long period of time. My strategy is that every time I go to the art supply store, I buy like 1 or 2. This makes my wallet happier, and as you can see, it's added up over time. One of the great things about these markers though is their durability. The nibs are replaceable and you can refill them with ink. That's why they're getting a 2-star rating instead of a 1-star. The refills are actually cheaper than the markers themselves, about $6, and you can fill them about 7 times according to their website. The nibs are also cheap. They run about $5 for a set of 10, and if you take this into consideration, you're actually really getting about 8 markers per marker. So while the upfront cost is high, you'll be buying fewer of them over time and will end up saving money compared to disposable markers. Because of this, if you use markers all the time, I'd actually recommend these as an investment in your art instead of getting a cheaper brand. Colors, a 5 out of 5. There are 358 different colors of Copic markers, and I find that they excel best at subtle colors and skin tones. I have a pretty expansive set of skin tones, which covers not just light and dark, but also different undertones. The colors are true to the marker cap. The sets are expensive, with a huge variety pack, or are grouped by color family, such as skin tones and jewel tones. The variety really shines here. Coverage, a 4 out of 5. The chisel tip can cover a wide area, and if you do so before it dries, you don't get any streaks. It's fairly easy to get a flat, even tone with these. Blendiness, a 4 out of 5. These markers blend best when you pile on color before it dries. I don't actually use the colorless blender much, but instead I prefer to blend with a mid-tone or a lighter color. Once it's dry, the blending isn't as good. These bad boys are my go-to, but I'm not going to pretend that they're right for everybody, especially if cost is an issue. Even their cheaper options are pretty expensive. I think that the variety of colors and the fact that they're refillable is a huge plus. I haven't found a better brand for skin tones. I think that if you're somebody who regularly uses markers, this is an excellent long-term investment, since you can refill them and replace the relevant parts. However, these will bleed if you use them in your sketchbook, so I'd recommend that you either get a marker-specific sketchbook like the render sketchbooks, or put a sheet of paper between your sketchbook pages. Overall, these get a 4 out of 5. Tombow brush pens were really trendy a few years back. I first saw them being used by people who like coloring books, bullet journals, and calligraphy. I've used them for all of these too, and they're great, but I'll be judging them based on how they color in illustrations. For feel, I give them a 3 out of 5. These pens have a felt tip brush and a fine point tip. The brush is great for both brush pen uses and to fill large areas like a chisel tip, and this is actually how I use them the most, to fill in large areas. They're longer than the average marker, and they don't really fit in my pencil pouch, which is a huge pain. I think some people will like the long and thin shape though. For some reason, these tore up my paper even though I was using a pretty heavy Bristol board, and they smudged all of my inking even though I was using Sakura Micron pens, which are usually smudge proofed, and I've inked an entire day before coloring, so they were definitely dry. I don't think this one was my fault, but I also don't always have this problem, so maybe it's the paper. For a cost, I'll give them a 4 out of 5. Each marker will run you about $3 each, or you can get a set of 10 for as little as 14 bucks. These are pretty readily available. You can buy them at like Target as well as art stores, and you can use coupons on them. They last a pretty long time too. I've only ever had to replace the ones that I use literally all the time. For colors, I give them a 2 out of 5. There's 108 colors of Tombow markers, which is wide enough for most varieties. I'm gonna give them a low score for 2 reasons. One is that they seem to have not very many midtones. It's either pastel, highly saturated, or dark. My biggest frustration with them is actually that the colors sometimes don't match the cap at all. I used a lot of midtones, so putting down a color and having it end up too dark or saturated is really frustrating. As you can see here, I struggled with getting a decent skin tone. To be fair, I don't have the skin tone set, but I do have a variety of neutrals that I thought would do the job based on their cap color, but it came out muddy and definitely not what I wanted. The highly saturated colors are the best ones, so if that's what you're going for, these will be fine. For coverage, I give them a 4 out of 5. This is actually how I use these the most often. They're pretty great for covering a large space, and they can end up streaky if you don't go fast enough, but I find that they easily cover a large area. For blendiness, I give them a 1 out of 5. I couldn't really get these to blend. The colorless blender doesn't seem to do anything, and it tore up my paper, so I gave up on it. One of the things that I use these for is coloring my sketchbook. It seems that no matter how much ink I pile on, it won't bleed through the next page, even if it's a thin sketchbook. They're great for doing that CalArt sketchbook thing where you fill in the background with a flat color, and you can't really beat the price as far as art markers go. A big plus if you do any kind of lettering or bullet journaling as well. I'd recommend them for somebody who uses more saturated colors and who doesn't mind that they don't blend, or somebody on a budget who wants as many colors as they can get for a lower cost. A 3 out of 5. Next up is a super hyped brand that I actually haven't tried before this challenge. Arteza. Arteza has a wide variety of different kinds of markers, and I think they're trying to be affordable alternatives to the more famous and expensive brands like Copics. These have a fine tip and a chisel tip. They actually remind me more of Prismacolor markers than Copic markers, in case anybody was wondering. Feel 5 out of 5. I really like these markers. The markers are about the same thickness as a Copic marker, and they're triangle shaped to prevent them from rolling, and maybe ergonomics? Can't be sure. Cost a 3 out of 5. These markers seem to come in big packs. I got the 60 count one for $57, and there's a 120 set for $105. This is the main reason I'm digging them, actually. I would have actually preferred to get a smaller set because $60 in order to try out some markers without actually knowing if I like them kinda sucks. For example, it's pretty important to me that I have a diverse set of skin tones. The 60 set only came with 5-ish, with not a lot of undertones and not the best shades for a smooth gradient. There's a set of 36 skin tone markers, which is $40. That means if I wanted to get diverse skin tones, I'd need to spend $40 on top of the $60 I paid for the regular set. That sucks. I hate it. You can't buy individual colors either, which means you're stuck with what the set sends you. I didn't love this, since this pack came with what seemed like an even number of every color. Like, there were 5 almost identical reds and only 5 grays. I rather would have had 1 or 2 reds and 8 grays, for example. The tips are replaceable, but you can't refill them. This, coupled with the fact that you have to buy a huge set to replace them, was a huge deal breaker for me. One of my markers came out of the box dry, and if I wanted to replace them, I'd be out of luck. Individually, the markers are a great price, but the fact that you have to buy huge sets in order to buy the colors you want is not a great deal. Sorry. Colors, a 4 out of 5. There's over 120 colors of Arteza markers. I don't have an exact calculation since not all of the skin tones and grays are included in the 120 set. Those 2 sets have 36 colors each. That's pretty promising in case I wanted to invest in more. The colors are bright and match the cap pretty well. I found myself frustrated with the color selection of the set though. There weren't enough midtones for me, so I had to resort to a very dark shadow a couple of times. This is a me problem, so I'm not gonna make a huge deal out of it. For coverage, a 5 out of 5. Perfect. Not streaky. Excellent. Good. For blendiness, I give them a 2 out of 5. Could anybody blend these markers? Despite their name, the colorless blender didn't really do anything, and so the only blended look I was able to achieve was when I drew similar tones over each other while it was still wet. This worked pretty well, so I'm not too upset about it, but definitely not ever blending. Overall, these markers are pretty high quality for the price, and I'd recommend them for beginners or people who use Prismacolor markers and want a cheaper alternative. These also would work pretty well for anybody who has a cel-shaded kind of style who doesn't mind that they don't blend as well. 4 out of 5. Here are all of my drawings side by side. I hope that you found this guide helpful. Ultimately, the best markers are what fits for your budget and what coloring style you want to use. Have y'all tried any of these brands? Which one's your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. If you're interested in seeing more art supply reviews, I have a lot of things planned. So subscribe to my channel. If you're interested in seeing the high-res photos of this art, I'm going to have them on my Patreon for $5 and up patrons. And I also have a $1 tier if you just want to vote on my upcoming video topics or have suggestions. Alright, thank you. Illy, bye!